This video is sponsored by Square Enix. So Hades and Persephone are having a renaissance. The Greek mythological couple has always been relatively popular, but in recent years we have seen several mainstream stories focus on the complicated love story between Hades, god of wealth and king of the underworld, and Persephone, the goddess of spring and queen of the underworld, an examination and renaissance largely heralded by women and queer people. So how exactly does the story of an uncle abducting his niece become a romantic story people keep wanting to tell? In this, my last video of 2021, we shall examine.
I am not a woman, I'm a god. I am not a mother, I'm a problem.
Look at Anthony and Uchanna. See some shirtless over there. Jason Todd, my son. Check him out. One of the most well-known depictions of the myth is the Gian Lorenzo Bertinelli statue, The Rape of Proserpina, using the Roman name of Persephone. The statue shows Hades gripping onto her leg and her pushing away from him and just cowering in fear. The word rape in the traditional translation is of the Latin rapidus, which means seized or carried off, and does not refer specifically to sexual violence. And so sometimes the story is called the abduction of Persephone to sort of put into perspective that there may not have actually been a sexual element to Hades taking Persephone. Due to there no longer being one source for Greek mythology other than overly sarcastic productions, the only source I recommend, there are many alternatives and variants to the abduction narrative, but it basically goes as follows. Hades sees Persephone and is like,
Name is Hades, Lord of the Dead. Hi, how you doing?
and Persephone essentially goes,
I'm a damsel. I'm in distress.
and Hades is like, well, your dad said I could take you, so yoink. Persephone eats some seeds of a pomegranate through some form of manipulation and becomes trapped in the underworld 6 months out of the year, and because her mom, Demeter, is the goddess of the seasons, she gets sad that her daughter isn't there because obviously one would, and so her sadness at not having her daughter around is why we have spring and winter. Within this very simple breakdown, we have the makings of many different stories and interpretations of Hades, Persephone, Demeter, and the age-old question of who the bad guy is in this situation. Spoiler alert, it's Zeus. It's always Zeus. One of the things that's interesting about Greek mythology as we know it is that, again, we don't really have any idea of the original narratives that these stories may have been based on. A lot of the myths were taken from other cultures and smaller cults in the area and reappropriated into stories that fit into the Greek cultural identity that they were forming for themselves. Overly sarcastic productions, which I've already mentioned, discusses this a lot in their examinations of Greek mythology, making it very clear that what we have left is really the cultural propaganda version of Greek mythology and not necessarily a real overlook into what the cultural roots of what these myths come from. In many examples, the marrying of Greek goddesses to gods is a symbolic dominance of the sky god, male culture, over the female-based earth culture that these patriarch societies were absorbing. There is some evidence that this is the case between the marriage of Hades and Persephone. Persephone and her mother were part of what is called, and I'm going to mispronounce this, the Eleusinian Mysteries. It was an initiation that was held every year for the cult of Persephone and Demeter. Their cult in this rite is considered one of the most famous secret religious rites in ancient Greece, and it's like old agrarian cult shit, female-based goddess shit. We have no idea how it works anymore. It's really interesting, and it's one of the religious practices from the Mycenaean period, the last phase of the Bronze Age in ancient Greece, which is approximately between 1750 to 1050 BC. While this stuff is lost, we can see appropriation and hints of other things. For Persephone, her common name as the vegetation goddess was Kore, and in Arcadia, she was worshipped under the title title of Despona, or the mistress, as a very old chthonic divinity. For those of you who play Hades, you know chthonic is old graveyard down below shit. In this term, we can see already the dual identity that she has as the goddess of spring and the queen of the underworld, and how a lot of what her Persephone's identity is the blending of this. Kore the Maiden and the dread Persephone. In Arcadia, Demeter and Persephone were often called, and again, I plan on mispronouncing words a lot, the Desponaia, or the mistresses, and they were two of the great goddesses of these Arcadian cults. When it comes to the Greek, it varies if Persephone was tricked or not into eating the fruit by Hades, but what is important to notice about the Greek interpretation is that Hades asks Zeus, her father, and Hades' brother, because it was incest, for permission to marry Persephone. None of this negates the lack of consent on Persephone's part, mind you, but what is important is that in Greek mythology, we see a lot of I transformed into a bird to get my nut narratives with no sense of even asking anyone for any kind of consent. So by asking permission, even though it's still effed up, we're not apologists here, but literally doing that and not just actually grabbing and going, Hades was in some way in the culture showing more respect for Persephone as a goddess, which is more than one could say for like literally every other man. Again, there is no evidence of sexual violence against Persephone, and while sometimes, again, this is called the rape of Persephone, it refers to the historical context of her just being taken without her permission. Part of the reason why Hades and Persephone have been explored so much is that in subsequent stories, despite this courtship, this rough wooing, to use the Scottish term, Hades and Persephone are often depicted as equals in power, and with very few exceptions are seen as relatively being faithful to each other, which is as good as these marriages get. And so, because of Persephone's roots in being a powerful deity and the fact that in this weird fucked up culture of the ancient Greeks in which women were just property and, you know, asking the dad for permission is as good as you were gonna get. It is the reason why people have taken this story with all its problematic layering and have tried to build a better narrative, not just in terms of the Hades Persephone romance, but specifically with Persephone. Haha, tricked it. This video is about feminism, baby. In a lot of these recreations, what they are trying to do is give Persephone more autonomy and more power in the modernization of the myth. And honestly, I think that's a great thing. And in doing so, you see a lot of the characters of the big three of Hades, Demeter, and Persephone being changed. So let's start off with the main guy himself. Hades, our sad boy goth rich boyfriend. There are many misconceptions about the role that Hades plays in pop culture, as my friend and colleague Lindsay Ellis explained on her examination of the topic. The whole plate? No, that's not what she did. Loose cannon. That's the one. I remember, girl. Hades is often portrayed as an antagonistic, malevolent force because of his role as god of the underworld and our very Christian world that has pushed him into the role of Satan, the devil, as a result of this, and therefore always being seen as an antagonistic force who is cruel, vengeful, malevolent, and all the things that we associate with Satan. Yet that doesn't really actually fit the role that Hades plays. For one, he's not even the god of death. That's Thanatos. He is the ruler of the underworld and also the god of wealth. So he is very, very, very rich. And I'm not saying that excuses things, girl, but it does make it easier to cry if your pomegranates are golden. Additionally, Hades was actually more altruistically inclined in mythology. He was portrayed as passive and not really negative within most mythology, and was mainly maintaining balance. He was cold and stern, as it must be to, you know, King the Dead, but he treated everyone equally and is more of kind of like a taskmaster. He has a job to do and he's doing it even if it makes him mean. Yet we will see versions of him longing to be king of the gods or resenting his position as god of the underworld. And while it's not as fancy as king of the sky or the sea. Hades is a king in his own right and has power that rivals his younger brothers. He doesn't actually need any of that stuff to be powerful. He's actually quite comfortable in his own skin, which I think is nice. Maybe Hecate gives him therapy. So him being slightly romantic-ish, lonely, rich, older, ruler of the dead, and having committed no actual rapes on record makes him apt for being retconned into sad boy TM and transformed from malevolent evil uncle into goth boyfriend who is just looking for his own flower maiden to enrich his dreary life. Big Jack Skellington energy. While both Persephone and Hades have been explored in more and more nuanced ways as modernization has moved forward, the odd person out who gets turned into a strange antagonist is Demeter. A strange trope I've seen pushed on Demeter is framing her as an overprotective helicopter plant who is keeping Persephone or Kore in some state of stasis. She can either be seen as doing it for the greater good or just out of misinformed protectiveness. I mean, considering she knows half of her family are sexual predators, can she really be blamed for not wanting her daughter to be around these hoodlums? Where are the leaders in the community? Okay, Anubis ain't doing this. One of the things that makes this interesting is that in the original myth, there is no indication that Persephone is being kept away from Olympus for any deep or malevolent helicopter mom reasons. What alarms Demeter naturally is her daughter suddenly being yanked from out of nowhere and nobody telling her what the hell goes on. And let's put a pin in that for a minute, because Demeter's daughter was taken without her permission, without any insight from her brother partner to marry off to her other brother. Her grief at losing her daughter is the reason why the seasons are what they are. And, you know, with climate change happening, I'm guessing there is some sort of strife in this whole situation, and I think we should get people into counseling. We need to take them to the red table. That's how we're going to solve climate change. The red table. Stepping back into mythical antiquity, it needs to be explained that, like her daughter, Demeter is both an earth and underworld goddess. Within Greek mythology, Demeter is not only the goddess of the harvest, but she also presided over sacred law and the cycle of life and death. Demeter is one of the great goddesses, and yet her child, an extension of her power, is being used as a political prop in the weird dynamics between her two brothers, with one of whom she has a baby with and is married to her sister. So, you know, they got issues. Now, this may be a Hades Persephone OTP account, but we can absolutely do that without making Demeter look like an asshole, because especially, and I hate to be this bold, she is the only one who is putting Persephone first in the story. What is also interesting is that in looking at older feminist reimaginings of the story, you do see more of a mother-daughter element being leaned on, like in Proserpine by Mary and Percy Shelley, which focuses on the perspective of Ceres, aka Demeter, following the loss of her daughter. I will away, and on the highest top of snowy Etna kindle two clear flames. Night shall not hide her from my anxious search. No moment will I rest or sleep or pause, till she returns, until I clasp again my only loved one, my lost Proserpine. Feminist critic Susan Gabar notes that the drama is really based on Pluto's, quote, egotistical predatory violence juxtaposed with Circe's, quote, loving kindness and willingness to sustain life and her unwavering devotion to her child. Instead of her grief, rather, it is Circe's anger in the Shelley interpretation that causes the famine to happen. I really enjoy this version of the story that I found while doing my research for this video. Not only does it highlight that female authors have been doing this sort of work of reimagining Greek mythology forever, even before Margaret Atwood, who is doing gender cop things, so we gotta Judith Butler all day. But it also highlights that a lot of the work being done by feminist imaginations of the text is giving voice to the voiceless, and that the women of Greek mythology tend to have some of the softest voices while leaving the biggest impact. And in that, we see the appeal, especially of why people want to be drawn to a character like Persephone, the Maiden, and the Dreaded.
I am not a woman, I'm a god.
So now we get to the main event, the Maiden Queen herself, Persephone. I've already gone into a lot of Persephone's mythological and like etymological backstory in the prior sections, so we're really going to pivot away from mythology and more into exactly what we have gotten with various versions of Persephone, summed up into sort of the three variants that come up with her character: the variant of the victim, the variant of the pragmatist, and the variant of the romantic. Percy Jackson and the Olympians is one of my favorite series to read. Yes, I am grown, but the books are good, so eat me. We don't have many portrayals of Persephone, but Persephone is mostly coming out of the kidnapped victim turned wife situation. One of the ways that this is highlighted is that when we see Persephone in the underworld, she is beautiful, but during summer, she looks even more fantastic. She's thriving, she's living, she's doing her best things. Still, she is married to Hades, and she's trying to be a good stepmom to Nico, because you know she turned him into a plant that one time. We love to see it. So it's not full victim Persephone, but it is leaning towards that way. But then the fucking movie happened. In The Lightning Thief, Persephone is played by Rosario Dawson, something that should have excited me, but in the end only made me disappointed and sad. She is being kept prisoner and ends up having an affair with the satyr for no reason than they needed to give her something to do. This was really, really terrible. I found this depiction of Persephone to be so belittling because you can tell they're like, we'll make her sexually empowered. And it's like, that's not the point. Also, again, rather than just do the right thing, they end up making Hades super antagonistic, leaning in onto the terrible mythology. Those movies are trash. They are the worst of the worst. And I think one of the main reasons why victim Persephone has fallen out of favor throughout most mythology isn't even because of just this desire or the romance or any sort of that implication. It's because people do not want her life to just be a constant state of misery, to have her just be a captive. I mean, we see so few queens be given equal standing. And one of the things that we do see, whether it's Persephone when Orpheus comes down to meet Eurydice, which we will get into in the next section, we want Persephone to have more than this because she does have some mobility. She does have some access to two worlds, and she does have a somewhat equalish partnership. And rather than Hera, who's getting constantly cheated on, or the women who Apollo and Poseidon constantly rape, that is not the reality with her relationship with Hades in general. And so people would rather empower her to be a more full person than simply limit her to this one stasis of a constant state of agony.
Why is it so hot down here? Hotter than a crucible.
The Tony Award-winning musical, which I saw live, girl, before the pandemic, during previews for $50, okay? Blends together like two of the sad mythology couples of Greek mythology. We got Orpheus and Eurydice, and you also get a little bit of Persephone and Hades. Now, Hades in this version has been bad. Very, very bad. It's a great mixture, actually, of the multiple layers of Persephone. She is married to Hades. They used to have this passion for one another, but it has slowly dissolved. That Persephone is just drunken on stage and just like, they want to reclaim that affection, but it has become so stifled.
That is like a really easy change to talk about. But that mainly comes from the fact that in these last two iterations, Persephone is complicit in the story and sort of the ugliness that Hadestown has become. I know it. but I'm ignoring it and blocking it. But that didn't come until these final 2 productions. So,
and because it's paralleled with Eurydice and Orpheus, I think it's a great way of showing those 2 relationships side by side. You know, Hades doesn't let people act like, if you've played Hades, you know, there is no escape. Orpheus, for those of you guys who don't know, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is that Eurydice is a beautiful maiden and she is married to Orpheus, who I believe is the son of Apollo. Either way, he is very good with a liar, girl. So that he be singing, he be jamming, he fall in love with Eurydice, people come, it's fire. After the wedding, some dude, some rapist, fall in love with Eurydice, start chasing her, she running, she booking it, she bob and weave, there's a snake. The snake is a hater. The snake is misogynist and bites her and she dies. And Orpheus is like, you know what I'm gonna do? Because my music is that fire, I'm a adele it into the underworld. I'm a roll it in the deep all the way down. And he does. He does. And so he plays music to Hades and Persephone. Now, I don't want to speculate what song I think would have moved them, but I wouldn't see it as some sort of male cover of Unbreak My Heart, because I know that would move me to let a person out the underworld if that were me personally. So he sings, and Ares and Hades goes, you have moved my queen. Like, Persephone's like, we gotta let these children go, child. And so they do. And Hades is like, all right, you can go, but if you turn around bright eyes, every now and then you will be a little bit lonely. And I'm sorry, this is my last video of the year and I keep making quips. Basically, if Orpheus turns around, she gone, girl, Amy done. And they go up, Orpheus is like, but is she really behind me? And he turns around and it fucks them up. So the musical's an adaptation of that. But with great music about why we build the wall to keep us free. And throughout it, you are seeing Persephone and Hades' relationship reconnect, while this other couple is also going through their own trauma. And what I love about Hadestown, besides the music and how talented and how good it all is that it shows that part of the draw of these stories is the tragedy, that there is that undercurrent of despair and anxiety. The reason why we're drawn to this story is the tragedy of it, that there's elements of their relationship that will always pull them apart, but we want to see them reconnect. And I think it does a really good job with Persephone specifically of giving her a voice, giving voice to her frustration. She's not just a side character like waffling. She is her own entity. And I think I love it. I didn't expect it to be a lot about Persephone and Hades when I first saw it, so when I did see it, I was like, yay! All right, let's get to the things that you're actually here to see. Lore and Punderworld, which I will also shout out for this. For those of you who follow me on Nebula, this video will be uploaded with an actual interview from Rachel Smith. We had a great conversation. We talked about lore, Olympus, and a bunch of other things. She's really great. So the full interview of that will be on Nebula, so you guys can see it there, and then it'll eventually be available for my patrons at the $10 level. Lore Olympus is the webtoons hit series by Rachel Smith and has become one of the most popular depictions of the relationship thus far. In it, Persephone is a 19-year-old goddess who goes out with Artemis to a party on Olympus and ends up catching the eye of Hades. Hades says that she is so beautiful that she shames even Aphrodite. And of course, petty Aphrodite hears this and is like, bet?
Now why am I in it? And you could have did it. See how I get wrong? Because you never apologized.
And decides to call up her son Eros to pull some shenanigans, and the story ensues. Punderworld is probably lesser known now at this point, but it is a similar type of story in that it reimagines the story of Hades and Persephone, with the two having sort of an awkward, slightly drunkenish courtship without fully knowing who the other is. In both of these, Demeter is the overbearing mother, and Hades is once again a softer, soft boy version of himself. I've only read the first volume of Punderworld. It is very cute. I would say if you are like me, waiting for lore in between updates, to definitely check it out. I've also checked out the Persephone Hades Torment comic by Seven Seas. It's, you know, it's not as erotic as I thought it was gonna be, but it is giving. It's cute. There's a nice little surprise at the ending, which I appreciated. But mainly in this section, I want to talk about lore. What I love about lore is how it blends so many aspects of the Greek mythology together, and also offers a thoughtful re-examination of some elements of the story. Now, spoiler alert for this and discussion of sexual trauma, you can skip to here if you don't want any lore spoilers, and I would highly recommend checking it out. In the story, Persephone is a survivor of rape by Apollo, and a part of her journey is healing, finding peace within herself, going to therapy, and being able to really be in control of her power. In both tales, Persephone's rebellion isn't just growing pains, but the reality of a young, powerful goddess not being raised to understand the fullness of who she is in the world, not being free emotionally, sexually, romantically, power-wise, and how that stifling can lead to more torment. I know some people have issues with lore because of the age gap. I have no problem with the age gap because in my mind, the Persephone-Hades relationship, as I said before, will always have some sort of problematic element to it. Glad it's not incest. I think it's played with in a really fun way. And I think for me, I think why it works for me is because it's so clearly wish fulfillment. Hades acts exactly how, if you are a young woman dating an older man, how you wish those relationships would play out. He actually is kind. I understand the concern about how it might make other people feel, but for me personally, like, it just isn't a factor for me. I think it is so rich in exploring different things. I think how it depicted Daphne, for that alone, I think it's worth a lot. And I think a lot of people feel very attracted to this story because it is a coming of age story. It is a Bildungsroman, and I think that's the best way to tell Persephone's story. Yes, it's a love story between Persephone and Hades, but it is about Persephone coming of age as a goddess, and that includes also coming of age in a relationship and finding out how to navigate that. I think that it's really well done, and I think it is a really good way of portraying it. And I think that to a degree Persephone has to be young because her whole story, her whole history is being in that liminal space of womanhood and childhood. And at least in this version of it, she gets to explore that largely in her own terms.
I can't entirely get used to seeing us together like this.
I love Hades so freaking much. Spoilers for the game, which I have been playing. Okay, I play. So you got my poster right here. I have beaten Hades so many times now. I'm past the epilogue. I'm currently playing it just so you can see. I'm not lying. So there it is. Going to Elysium, the battle of Theseus is bitch ass. I've only lost to Theseus, even on extreme measures, 3 times, okay? I got my Aridine tattoo. She don't let me get hit. I be bobbing and weaving down, bitch. I love our protagonist, Zagreus, whose name itself is a really great play on a lot of the elements of the, like, again, overly sarcastic productions has discussed this, but Zagreus is great. He's the son of Hades, and he is breaking out of Tartarus and the underworld in order to find his mother, Persephone, who believes he died in childbirth. Throughout the story, and as you continue to kill your dad and come back, Persephone explains that she had a loving marriage to Hades, which came about from Zeus gifting her to Hades for taking charge of the underworld, which Hades thought was a completely dick move and hated Zeus for that, which respect to him. And Zagreus was stillborn due to the fates having a prophecy that Hades would never sire an heir. Over the grief of losing her son, she ran away, and with help from Nyx, the goddess of the night, she hid away from the Olympians and from Hades himself. Persephone in this role has a supporting playmate because she is the mother figure, but it is a role that we don't really get to see her in. She's not the mother, she's always the maiden or the queen. But now we see her as a mother and becoming the bridge between the gods of Olympus and the gods of the underworld, once again becoming a liminal space. And it's interesting seeing her in that form and also seeing how that form would affect her as a mother. And it's a different version of her that I haven't seen before. And I like how she's a pragmatist, how she is a little weird. And I love how she's able to just like whoosh, Hades into shape.
Everyone has been quite welcoming. The darkness is a pleasant change of pace. And while the stress can be a little difficult to move in, I quite like it.
It's refreshing. And I think the thing that I love most about Persephone being a mom in Hades is that we see grown-up adult Persephone. There is so much fetishism of age that can come about with Persephone in certain adaptations, but to see her be like a grown woman who is a mom and has a son and like is doing queen shit and has her 2 little outfits, I love it about her. I think it takes her away from the perpetual princess role and makes her a queen. And I think that's what I want from her. I love Persephone. And I think a lot of young women love Persephone because of all of those things that she encompasses about womanhood, about the duality of nature of what we are told to be, and also because her story gets to have different layers that you can fill in a way that not a lot of goddesses get to have. And one of the books I read for this video, Heroine with 1001 Faces. I love Maria Tarr's work. Some of you, I think I've mentioned this before, but I did my master's dissertation on colorism and fairy tales with a focus on Snow White. So I'm very familiar with Maria Tarr's work. And in this book, she recounts the following quote from Joseph Campbell to Marie Murdoch, the author of The Heroine's Journey. Women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological tradition, the woman is there. All she has to do is realize the place that people are trying to get to. She also quotes my mortal enemy, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Team Zelda, who said, "The 2 basic stories of all time are Cinderella and Jack the Giant Killer, the charm of women and the courage of men." On a deeper level, I believe people choose to humanize the Hades and Persephone relationship because unlike a lot of female deities who have a very fixed role, Persephone's main story is all about, again, her coming of age, being forced to go from girl to woman due to the acts of men, without regard for her own desires or goddesshood rather than humanity in this case. Much like how in Beauty and the Beast, the original fairy tale, not the movie, one of the aspects is a woman being trapped due to some error with gardening. There's desire to soothe women who are forced to escape shitty situations through marriage, because as much as we live in a modern society where that's not always the option, sometimes for some women throughout time, marriage was a way to escape. There were some women who could only exist in power through being married. In Greek mythology, there are very few goddesses, I would say no goddesses, who are unmarried and still sexually active without some element of like rape or constant fear of rape. It is really either the empowered virgin or nothing. Even I think if I think about it, like I can't think of any of Hecate. I can't think of any stories of Hecate getting dick. I know Celine did, but there's a little dubious consent with her putting Endymion to sleep and then making him bust all the time. There's been a dubiousness of that. So really in Persephone, you see one of the few women who is not just one thing. And also in adaptations, by giving Persephone the option of choosing her own fate, in some way it allows us to give one of the few goddesses in mythology some autonomy in how she chooses her path, while sadly still making it shown that it is through the protection of a husband that she ultimately can have that flexibility, that mobility to go places. I think one of my favorite French books I forget how to pronounce it properly. It's called like Maisons Laurent, but it's about a woman who is a courtesan and cannot have any real job other than that. I think sometimes in our modern society, it is really hard to understand that women really only had, for so much time in history, especially in the West, very limited roles. It was either priesthood, like a nunnery, marriage, or prostitution, sex work. And those were your realms. And you only really got mobility access through those areas. And if you didn't navigate in them in some way, you were just fucked. And I think that's why we reimagine these stories. I grew up in the era of the Disney Renaissance, and that era is largely filled with reimaginings of fairy tales starring women. The Disney princess films of the 80s and 90s especially were trying to recapture the adventure of those stories for the modern woman, to tell these stories by putting the voices of the women first. Persephone, like the nameless Little Mermaid, or the heroine only named Beauty in Beauty and the Beast, is an avatar in many ways of an emotion, a feeling, a season. She is there to teach a lesson about why we have the seasons. It is not the story of a poor goddess trying to find herself. The reclaiming of Persephone and the flipping of the Hades Persephone story into something more pragmatic to romantic allows Persephone to go somewhere, to have mobility, to answer a hero's journey call and create her own destiny, her own legacy for herself, to be called by her own names without her mother, and using the impulsive longing of a sad man to reform herself into a goddess equal to Hera in her own domain. Not just another princess or disposable goddess or nymph. There are those who might say that in these adaptations we are attempting to whitewash the darkness of Greek mythology or mythology in general, and I think that that is impossible. These stories are based on myths so old we don't even know the origins anymore. Every culture takes these kinds of stories and transforms them to fit their values. That's the reason why in Greek mythology Ares isn't well liked, but in Roman mythology Mars is seen as a powerful, strong figure. The culture changes the deity to fit their values. We creators of the day are doing the exact same thing. Also, Greek mythology and most stories about gods are not existing to be just moral stories. They are tales of human failing. We should be able to change them to fit how we'd like them today. Why not? Why does Persephone need to be perpetually depowered in order to highlight how terrible the men of Greek mythology are? And through these reimaginings and through these retellings, we get to make it not about them anymore. Also, speaking of, do you guys remember Class of the Titans, where they had like Hades and Persephone, and Hades was like purple and was like, hello my love, you're so you know, that shit was fire. I want more of that. I love Simp Hades. I think that is the most powerful thing. Make all Kings of the Dead simps. This video is sponsored by Square Enix. Hey, look, I mean it.
5,000 units to the Hellraiser who kills these so-called Guardians of the Galaxy.
Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is a single-player, story-driven action-adventure game developed by Eidos Montreal, out now for PS4, PS5, Xbox consoles, PC, and the Switch. I've already been enjoying this game. I already planned on playing it before because it had such great reviews, including like 94% positive reviews on Steam. And the game is currently on sale on all platforms, so it is a perfect gift for the holidays. And as someone who will be spending Christmas and New Year's Eve inside, it's gonna be a fantastic distraction. If you're looking for a game that's gonna make you laugh, cry, feel that Marvel-sized hole in your chest, this is the one. I personally will be, during the New Year's, be doing a little bit of Twitch streaming of the game once I get better at it, but I'm really excited about this. I have been trying to play more games lately, and I'm loving it so far. I'll actually put up some clips that you can see of me freaking out. Like, I love the design, actually. I actually prefer that it doesn't look like the particular cast of the movie, and just looks like how the characters would look from the comics. I think it's really important to realize that, like, these things have a life outside of the MCU. It is okay for them to look different. It is okay for Star-Lord to not look like Chris Pratt. Peter Quill had a Dazzler poster in the background. I was like, we did it. We've won. Because you know what? They can do that crossover in the game. Oh my god, guys, look in the corner of his wall. It's a Dazzler poster. Oh my god. That's so cool. Oh my goodness, it's Dazzler. Okay, I love this. Once I get my Twitch up and running, I will probably be doing a little bit of streaming of me playing the game for Christmas Eve. But I really enjoyed playing it. It was really, really fun. I am so excited to have this sponsorship. It totally took me by surprise, but as a baby gamer and someone who likes fun character-driven games, this has been a pleasure to play and a pleasure to share with you. And if you have been playing it, let me know what you think. Hey guys, so I just want to let you guys know this is my last video for 2021. Your girl is taking a winter break. I want to spend some time to just sort of like recoup mentally and focus on writing my book, and also just prepare for the bigger projects that I want to do next year. For those of you who follow me on Patreon, you know I'm planning about 2 different mini-series for the next year, some big topics, some fun topics, so I really want to take some time to get ready and remember why I love doing this kind of work. This year my channel blew up, Magical Negroes blew up, I got to collaborate with so many amazing people, I got sponsorships. It has been a true pleasure to get to do this for so many people. So yeah, one hint I will say for the upcoming project is I am going to be doing a series of videos called The Bonnie Diaries, where I will be revisiting and examining the Vampire Diaries series, really analyzing Bonnie Bennett's storyline across those seasons. It was something I wanted to do for a long time, but I got intimidated because of Jenny's video on the Vampire Diaries. I was like, no one's gonna want to see this again. It's gonna be too repetitive. But then I remembered, like, I've been talking about the Vampire Diaries in Race for like years. Like, I saw that the Friendly Space Ninja, whose stuff I love, is also doing a Vampire Diaries thing, and I was like, oh my god, it's gonna be too derivative. But like, honestly, I've been doing it since before it was cool, so I'm really excited to do it. And if you miss any of my stuff, I will have my writing up on Patreon. I'll be talking about movies and shows that I'm watching. I got some Succession thoughts I'm getting ready to put up there. So if you follow me at the $2 level or up, you will get that. And I have an upcoming video that's Patreon only, talking about the Alice Sebold situation. And then I will be having a video on Nebula about Spencer and the Diana legacy in media. So even though I'll be going hiatus, I will be making sure there's goodies for people who follow me on Patreon. And I got a huge back catalog for you guys to look through. So I hope that you guys won't miss me too much. I will miss you. Thank you so much for all the support this year. I really would not have gotten through this year without it, and I hope that next year I can bring you multi-levels of entertainment with not just more videos, but actually a really fun, witchy novel full of queer things and hot elf chicks, and yeah. And I think the reason why I want to focus on the book specifically is because we've lost Anne Rice and Bell Hooks back to back, and when I think about the legacies that they left behind with their writing, I know I'll never be able to reach that height. I'm not hubris. This is a Greek mythology video, but I do want to leave behind a piece of that legacy. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's get loud.